This podcast is sponsored by the Tree of Life Memorials and Digital in Stone. This is a new platform to create digital memorials, environmental legacies, and fine art monuments. This way we could share the stories, preserve the memories, conserve the land, and connect the souls, because love never dies.
This podcast does not provide medical nor legal advice. Please listen to the complete disclosure at the end of the recording.
Hello and welcome to Everyone Dies, the podcast where we talk about serious illness, dying, death, and bereavement. I'm Marianne Matzo, a nurse practitioner, and I use my experience from working as a nurse for 45 years to help answer your questions about what happens at the end of life.
And I'm Charlie Navarrete, an actor in New York City, and here to offer an every-person viewpoint to our podcast. We are both here because we believe that the more you know, the better prepared you are to make difficult decisions when a crisis hits.
So welcome to this week's show. Please relax, get yourself something comforting to drink and some pie, because we love us some pie.
Some pie.
And thank you for spending the next hour with Charlie and me as we talk about digital memories. Like the BBC, we see our shows offering entertainment, enlightenment, and education, and divide that into three halves to address each of those goals. Our main topic is in the second half, so feel free to fast forward to that babble-free section if you need to. In the first half, Charlie has a reading from John Green's Paper Towns and our recipe of the week. In the second and third half, I'm going to be talking about digital memories with our guest, Caroline Jones, who is the CEO and founder of Digital in Stone of Tree of Life Memorials. Hi, Charlie.
Who is this? Oh, it's Marianne.
Good morning, sunshine.
There's no sunshine here, and there's no sunshine when you're gone. Yeah, it's just been nothing but rain.
Where I'm going? Where am I going? To hell?
No, the song. Ain't no sunshine.
I thought you knew something I didn't.
No. Well, of course, one day, and I don't know, what is it, 4 billion years in the future, there will literally be no sunshine, as the Earth will be engulfed by an enlarged sun. But I don't expect to be here for that. No.
Well, I don't know, Charlie. The clean living that you do, you just might be.
So that's why I always recommend top shelf booze. Then clean living.
Mm-hmm.
So what's going on over
there? I've been gardening. I just can't believe how everything is popping up all over, and it's so early in the month. So go figure that. I don't know. It was like 80 yesterday. I was sitting in the sunshine, getting rid of all the dead leaves and stuff.
Well,
my hands in that nice warm dirt.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank goodness that that climate change thing all the kids are talking about, I guess it's not real. All right, good.
Oh,
so
it
can't be that. So good. Yeah.
No,
yeah.
We even had a senator, go into the Senate with some snow and say, look.
Oh, I remember that.
What's all this fuss I hear about climate change?
Oh, silly wabbits. So
what do you got for us today,
well,
Charles?
listen, what do I have? In the first half, our first half, John Green's Paper Town is a coming-of-age story about a group of teens weeks away from their high school graduation. This reading occurs toward the end of the book as the lead characters talk about a dead body they found as young children of a man who had committed suicide. It would have been nice to tell him that, whatever it was, that it didn't have to be the end of the world. Although in the end, something kills you. When I've thought about him dying, which admittedly isn't that much, I always thought of it like you said, that all the strings inside him broke. But there's 1,000 ways to look at it. Maybe the strings break, or maybe our ships sink, or maybe we're grass, our roots so interdependent that no one is dead as long as someone is still alive. We don't suffer from a shortage of metaphors, is what I mean. But you have to be careful which metaphor you choose, because it matters. If you choose the strings, then you're imagining a world in which you can become irreparably broken. If you choose the grass, you're saying that we are all infinitely interconnected, that we can use these root systems not only to understand one another, but to become one another. The metaphors have implications. I like the strings. I always have, because that's how it feels. But the strings make pain seem more fatal than it is, I think. We're not as frail as the strings would make us believe. And I like the grass, too. The grass got me to you, helped me to imagine you as an actual person. But we're not different sprouts from the same plant. I can't be you, you can't be me. Maybe it's more like you said before, all of us being cracked open, like each of us starts out as a watertight vessel. And these things happen. These people leave us or don't love us or don't get us or we don't get them. And we lose and fail and hurt one another. And the vessel starts to crack open in places. And I mean, once the vessel cracks open, the end becomes inevitable. But there is all this time between when the cracks start to open up and we finally fall apart. And it's only in that time that we can see each other because we see out of ourselves through our cracks and into others through theirs. When do we see each other face to face? Not until you saw into my cracks and I saw into yours. Before that, we were just looking at ideas of each other, like looking at your window shade but never seeing inside. But once the vessel cracks, the light can get in and the light can get out.
I really like that.
Me too.
That reading.
Yeah.
So do you think we're grass or strings?
Strings. Threads. Threads that interconnect. Threads. Strings. Yep. What do you think?
I think more grass
Mhm.
because I think, people who are isolated are, they lose sense of time and sense of self and sense of purpose. It's like that we need those, that interconnectedness, that reciprocity between people.
And I understand that
But-
some people don't. There's a difference between finding solace and being, I guess, alone, but alone because, as you're saying, you can't connect with someone else. Maybe you just don't have it in you. That's not your personality. I think solace is good, just finding that time for yourself and doing the things that mean something to you. Yeah, and it's just personal. I mean, just sitting, reading a book, and then, falling asleep. I don't know, I just find that very, very peaceful, or just, listening to music. There's no rhyme or reason. It's just something that nurtures you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that.
Yep. I totally get that. I get that, when I'm in my garden and just me and the worms and flowers.
You and the worms.
Me and the worms.
And one day we will become worm food.
Oh, well.
Well, that's the way it goes. Because, everyone dies, Marianne.
No.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. That's everyone dies.
God, that's so morbid, Charlie. Do we have to talk about death?
Yes. Our recipe of the week, ladies and gentlemen, was chosen as a meatless dish to get you the rest of the way through Lent. I do need to disclose that it has 3 slices of bacon, but you could substitute some liquid smoke and remain sinless. Oh, what's the fun in that? The recipe is for southern fried cabbage, which is healthy as well as tasty and will keep you pure. The cabbage in this dish melts in your mouth. So, for your next funeral lunch, especially if it is held on a Friday in Lent, give this recipe a try. Bon appetit.
Where'd Julia go?
Hello, Marianne.
Hello.
See, you do that much better than I.
Only when I'm not put on the spot.
That's true. Yes, I understand.
I can't be Julia under pressure.
I understand, unless you're like Ella Fitzgerald or Frank Sinatra, who are just there regardless of the situation. Yes, I agree.
Mm.
Please go to our webpage for this week's recipe for Southern fried cabbage and additional resources for this program. Your tax-deductible donations are always welcome so that we can continue to offer you quality programming. Thank you in advance for making your donation at www.everyonedies.org. That's every, the number one, dies.org. Marianne?
Thanks, Charlie.
I'm here today with Caroline Jones, who is the owner-operator of Tree of Life Memorials by Digital and Stone. Caroline, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
I came across your company, I think maybe it was on Facebook, and I thought, what an interesting thing to do. Why is it that you came to be involved with it?
Well, my background is a painter. I'm an artist and a sculptor. And about almost 10 years ago now, I got a commission to do a headstone via the Getty because I donated some tools and provided some stone for their symposium that they had on Canterbury Cathedral.
Mm-hmm.
And after that was asked if I could do a headstone for somebody who had lost their mother. And in that process, I found the most incredibly profound experience working not only for the grieving, but also for the departed. And as I listened to this lovely woman telling me stories about her mother, I just thought, gosh, if I could infuse this stone with these stories and the sense of place and have something that could not only comfort her in her grief, but provide for her a sort of a repository of those stories, it would be amazing. And so that was the sort of idea that created Digital and Stone and the Tree of Life Memorial.
So I was under the impression this is a new company. You got the idea 10 years ago. How long have you been kind of doing the work then? You've been doing
the company is new. I mean, the idea was I hadn't even thought of how one could create a digital platform with an interface of a tree that you could add your memories to. It was just the nucleus of the idea that started 10 years or nearly 10 years ago. For many years, it was just creating the headstones. And a sort of a grounding place or an ascending stone for, people that were grieving their loved one, and doing it in a way that was creative and artistic, and not sort of the generic, offering something that was not the generic headstone that you would get in normal circumstances from a cemetery. And also developing the idea and working with the realities that the cemetery model needs to change, the burial model needs to change, all of the environmental issues that we are more aware of nowadays with the onset of green burial, as opposed to the traditional forms of burial that are offered now. So it's combining those things, realizing if there could be a way to conserve the planet, preserve these stories, and infuse them all into one artistic space.
So, have you noticed, is there like a certain type of person who chooses a certain type of memorial? Because you've got land memorials and stone memorials and digital memorials. Have you found that you kind of can chat with somebody and think, oh, I bet you're all going to go for this kind of memorial? Or do people come in knowing exactly what it is they want?
It's a good question. I don't really think people do come in. I mean, it depends. There are people who come in knowing exactly what they want, or that they are reaching out because what is familiar to them is the idea of a headstone that may be, more artistic than what's being offered in the cemetery. Most people don't know about a digital platform as a way to create and preserve their memories. And then the environmental legacy section hasn't yet really been done where people are adding that to their own personal story. But what I am finding, because of the digital interface and because of digital media and digital marketing, that platform has now kind of switched into being the one that people are approaching us on or have heard of through the socialization of it, I guess, and through a little bit of online marketing. That they think, oh, yes, of course, it's easy to upload my photos. Where am I going to put the voice messages? How great that there is a service where I can put all of these things in one place and it preserves it, and it can connect it to the burial ground through GPS coordinates or QR code, which you can place on the headstone. So it's still moving, it's still growing, it's still socializing, and I can't really say, there is a definitive one is stronger than the other at the moment in time. It's almost equal.
So do you notice any cultural differences in terms of people using or engaging with your company?
Yeah, again, another interesting question. I do, but I feel like I tend to that. As a person, I've lived extensively in various different parts of the world, mainly in Asia, in Europe, and in America. And I'm pretty sensitive to different cultural stances, if you like, or heritage approaches. I think that we offer two different models: the version of a digital memorial light, and the digital memorial plus. And one is, the light is like a standard version, and the plus is a premium version. And I think that the light, with simply images, sort of an epitaph or an obituary, if you like, and then an area for people to add their memories, is the one that is most able to translate and cross different cultures, because you don't need to share, or you're not sharing. You just share what you want. It doesn't come with a structure where we provide thought starters for different chronology in one's life. And that perhaps could be more nuanced with regards to the different culture you come from. Oh, I don't want to talk about the passing, or we don't need to talk about the loves of our life, or we don't want to share the adventures. We may just want to say, this is the person, this is what their life was like in one, an epitaph or an obituary, sharing what we choose to share. Of course, you choose to share what you want in any of them, but I think that one is more applicable across the board at this point in time.
So can you talk to us about the three different types? So, like, there's the land memorial. So can you talk to us about that one first?
Yeah. So the land memorial idea is sort of merging into actual environmental legacy partnership. And the concept being that you can conserve the land, you can plant trees, you can donate to ocean saving funds, you can work with park guardianship. We've created a park guardianship program. Our first park guardian program is with the Joshua Tree National Park, whereby you can donate to the park through our platform, via someone's memorial, and it goes onto their digital memorial. They get a certificate. The money goes to the park. The same thing with tree planting. You can plant a tree in your loved one's name. It's recorded on the memorial, on the digital memorial. And the whole thing connects. So you get to see pictures of the tree. You get to put the GPS coordinates of where the land or whatever it is that has been conserved or planted. You get the coordinates of that, so you can Google Earth where it is. You get a certificate for it. And so that is pretty much where the land memorial concept has now developed into a physical space, if you like, but that is in a digital form on your memorial. Does that explain the land?
Yeah, I think so. It can be, so is it any kind of tree anywhere in the world, or how?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the idea for us is to develop as many partnerships with initiatives that are doing conservation or restoration of the land. It's basically the idea being, leave this world a better place. What can you do to generate your own environmental legacy or provide one for the future generations in honor of your loved one? And so the idea about it being land memorial is really land conservation or land restoration or, ocean restoration. It's about saving the planet, for lack of a better term, and having that done in honor of your loved one and a way for you to account for that through this platform.
That sounds pretty cool. Now, the stone memorials, that's the kind of art piece of it. Is that correct?
Yeah. So we call it stone memorials just to try to separate the physical aspect of it. It started with fine art memorials and fine art monuments. And we work with artists within our company and artists that are locally based according to wherever the need may be. The idea being that use the natural resources and use the artistic creative resources that are around you instead of shipping in a generic headstone from another country. Just giving you a heightened sense of something more unique, something more beautiful, tapping into the traditional ways of creating a physical memorial. But it also has expanded into what I call community memorials, whereby it's a space for a community to be able to commemorate, let's say, the loss of loved ones during COVID, and perhaps it becomes a memorial park. And therefore, you would combine both the environmental legacy or the land memorial section by planting trees in honor of each of those loved ones, and then have a central one monument or one memorial or one big stone, some artistic, creative, fine art monument in that space that connects all of those stories and grounds them in one place. And that as a model, we envelop it into the stone memorial section, but that is what the community memorial has turned into.
That's really cool. Have any communities done anything like that? Have any communities, as a city or a town or whatever, done that?
But we're working on a couple at the moment, and they're not done yet. So I'm not going to share exactly, but just to know that it works wonderfully for communities, whether they have suffered losses during COVID or perhaps, for example, at the moment we're doing 100 digital memorials for the Ukrainian families who've lost loved ones in the war. And, in the future, that would be fantastic if that would be grounded in one place in a park in Ukraine. But obviously, who knows how long that's going to be. But that would be the intention. It starts off with the digital and will turn into the stone memorial in a community environment. And all of those stories would be grounded into one physical location. So, yeah.
I could see that even happening, the Maui fires.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we have a whole platform for that as well, for the Maui fires. We donated a series of memorials, digital memorials for that. And that's the exact concept, and the intention. I have other projects that I'm working on at the moment that, tend to the needs of multiple families attached to one particular tragedy or one particular loss of lives in one area. And so the idea being is that create a fine art monument that encompasses everybody's needs and ground everybody's stories in one place, but make it a community environment so that people can come and be in space, see a beautiful, whether it's just a grounding stone, whether it's a monument, whether it's a combination of monument and park, whether it's trees planted, but have all of those things in one area, providing solace for the community and a sense of recognition and remembrance, honoring those that have lost their lives at that time.
Yeah, I live near Oklahoma City, and have you ever been to the Oklahoma City Memorial?
No, I haven't, but yeah.
Oh, if you ever come out, let me know. We'll take you around. But that, is very much a powerful memorial, and it's on the site of where the Murrah building bombing was.
Yeah.
And they have chairs. I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of it, but there's adult chairs and children chairs that are lit up at night. And there's one chair for each person that died. And it is really powerful. And then there's a statue of, it's called When Jesus Wept. And it's, Jesus with his head hanging down. And then inside, there's an inside memorial, and they have these little cases where family members could put whatever they wanted into, but there's one for each person. And, some of them have, the glasses they were wearing, but yeah, the children, there were so many children. There's, their little toys. It's just like you walk through, and it's just so heartbreaking. But, I can see how your services could be used. I mean, unfortunately,
exactly. I know, and it's
dramatic kind of things that we go through.
Yes, and it's this part of it enhances something like that. And as you say, as a service, it's providing a ritual of mourning in its way of allowing the families to continue. It's not a static situation. So, the case has a limit. It has a size limit, and it's a beautiful artistic piece, I'm sure, and incredibly powerful, and I'm sure completely sufficient. But you could also just then add, let's say, this QR code to that, and that could also be where the family keep on adding forevermore, pictures of their child's toy, or it's their birthday today and I'm thinking of them, or a note that's written that's private to that child or loved one. So it has this capacity to keep on growing, or again, recording, I planted this tree this day for my loved one. And it grounds it all in one space, but it's a ephemeral space, a digital space, a sacred space in digital form.
And I don't think, people from all over the world hear our podcast. I really can't address how other people in other countries, handle mourning. But I see, living here in the United States, that we don't really do mourning very well. We don't know how, and we don't always have a way to express what it is that we're feeling. And I think that what you're offering is, another way to express that this person was important in my life, and they're still important even when they're not here with me anymore.
Absolutely. Recently, I was at something called a Death Cafe, which I don't know if any of your listeners are familiar with, or if you are, but yes, wonderful, again, community gathering of people that come together to share, discuss, express grief about a loss, usually, of course, to do with a loved one, sometimes a little more esoteric, but it's primarily for the loss of a loved one. And there was this moment of complete, extraordinary sharing with this young lady who had talked about losing her child at birth, almost 3 or 4 days after birth. And she had lost her father a year before, who she was very close to. And she made this point where she said that when she was losing her child and knew she was losing her child, her father seemed so present to her. And she was able to, more so than her husband, for example, at that moment in time, feel and be still the mother to her child at this passing. And what she shared was that the roles we have, as whether it be the child of our father or the mother to our own child, those roles never change. They never go away, even if someone dies. And these are the things that we don't get gifted with through society. We don't get gifted with that knowledge. We have such a sort of terrible relationship with death, with suffering, or with loss, because we don't have these societal explanations or understandings or conscious awareness around the death process. I feel other cultures do, more so than Western civilization, but we've been, it kind of was removed from us through our sort of original religions, perhaps, through the way that we have developed as a society. Our relationship with death is often stuck in the trauma of grief. It doesn't seem to go beyond that until at some point we either just carry that grief or we, become diseased from it. And so I feel like something like what we're doing, and there are other services out there towards either a conscious dying or towards the end of life awareness or towards grief counseling or care, are all there to help us recognize that we don't need to be stuck in trauma. We don't need to resist. We can't resist death. We can't hold it off. Every single one of us dies, hence the name of your podcast and who you are.
Exactly.
Everyone dies. Everyone is born and everyone dies. So why not come together in that knowledge and if you can, have comfort in knowing that your relationship with your loved one does not change just because they are not here in body. It's terribly sad. We all suffer in that grief. We suffer in that loss. However, we do not need to get stuck in the trauma of it. We can instead celebrate the connection that is eternal, because love never dies.
Right? Yes, we often say, a person dies, but the relationship doesn't die.
Exactly.
And, that's really, Caroline, why we started our nonprofit, was that, in my clinical work, saw so many people who didn't have any idea about the illnesses that they were diagnosed with, or how to process those, or how to grieve, or what options were available to them in terms of, there's traditional burial, but there are so many other options. And, there's also other ways besides the headstone in a cemetery somewhere in order to memorialize people. And our goal is to, learn as much as you can so that you can make informed decisions. And yeah, it's uncomfortable. Yeah, it's difficult, but
look terribly sad.
It has to, because you're gonna, people get really upset with our name, because it's like, we don't want to think about that. It's like, I know.
I know it's a funny thing. Yeah, it's a funny thing. Like and I, of course, experience that so often, but it's so strange how, again, I feel like it's within Western culture more than anywhere else. But you can even, if you talk about death with somebody, they somehow feel like you're going to make them die. It's like, don't be silly. It's not, there's no curse being put upon you because we're talking about death, Like, don't be daft. I mean, it doesn't mean you're going to die because we're talking about it. You're going to die no matter what. It's when.
We need
and how.
We need a T-shirt that says, don't be daft.
Don't be daft. Absolutely. Everyone dies.
Yeah.
That's
our motto.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's best prepare consciously with heart, and best you can. I mean, that doesn't mean focus on death in your life all the time, but I think that many of the more sort of death positive, death conscious, either organizations or associations or practices, very much celebrate the reality that if you embrace death in a more conscious, positive way, you live your life in a more conscious, positive way.
Yeah. And we talk about, our tagline is every day is a gift. And that comes from, my experience of watching people. I always say I've seen people frittering away their lives, and people laugh at me like, fritter? Yes, they fritter away their lives instead of living consciously and saying, this is a great day. This is a great day to be alive and live our lives. We always think that there's going to be a tomorrow. And the reality is, we don't know that that's true.
Absolutely. It's an interesting thing because I think some people come to that awareness earlier on or at different times, but oftentimes I think it's because they have experienced death or loss in their life. And if they've experienced the loss of a loved one, they know the reality of the fact that there is this moment in time where all the rest of that nonsense just doesn't matter. What matters is that you love this person, that you need almost a redemptive love. You need to be in space with them where you need to share that you love them, and all the rest of it really doesn't matter because you feel, oh my God, they're not going to be here tomorrow. So I just must make sure that I say these things, that we connect at this level, and the rest of it is irrelevant. And then if you lose somebody and you've had that experience, or you didn't have that experience but had that awareness afterwards, then forevermore, for the most part anyway, you go through your life saying, you know what, it's not really that important that we argued over this, or it was really important that we left, you left today and we were in an argument. I need to call you just to say, look, don't agree with you, but I love you, just in case something happens, And my kids are always like, all right, Mom, calm down. We know. I'm like, well, seriously, I know we can argue about this, or I'm going to tell you off about that. But at the end of the day, of course, it doesn't really matter because I love you.
And there's so many people that, I've in my work as a nurse practitioner where people said, the last thing I said to them was, piss off or whatever. And they don't get that moment to, and you're right, my kids are the same way. It's like, don't be so dramatic, Mom. It's like, no, I don't want to go through life thinking that's the last thing I said, or I don't want you to go through life if something happens to me thinking, that's how those were the last words we said to each other. Because we don't then get another chance to go back and say, oh, I need to do over here. I want my last words to be this.
I know, but I have to say on the other side of it, as I started to make these headstones for people, as I said, I felt like not only was I working for the grieving, but I was working for the departed. And even though I didn't know if I did or not, I felt like I had almost a voice of authority to let them know that it is okay, that it doesn't matter that they didn't say this, because say it now. And that's what I mean. That's why I ended up creating the digital memorial aspect, so that you can keep that connection alive, in your mind, in your heart, in your intent. So, because I feel, and of course, I don't know it to be true, but I feel that when we do die, we move on from all the clutter of what kept us in a negative space, perhaps, and we are more enlightened, hopefully. And everybody gets forgiven for their sins. And, why not, instead of going through the rest of your life thinking, oh my God, I didn't say this, say it now. Say it now and know that your loved one can hear you and it's all okay. So still move on, still, engage in, there is always an opportunity to forgive and embrace and have, as I heard recently on a podcast, all about redemptive love. And I just thought that was such an interesting term. And then, of course, it did attend to that moment when people do pass away and how we do have this redemptive love. If we have that opportunity to hold hands and just to say, all is okay. Well, I think that goes beyond the grave. It's a level of consciousness. And, I think that, maybe it's wishful thinking, but I genuinely believe that is the case. And that's why I ended up building this digital memorial space, so that you could create in that space of love, whatever memories you wanted to accumulate, whatever voice messages you wanted to put in there, whatever it was, because it is redemptive, it is helpful, it is connecting, and sort of eternal in that way.
So the digital memorials, are they there, to infinity and beyond?
As far as the digital world is, who knows what's going on in this world that we live in 100 years' time or 200 years' time or what have you. But yes, the intention is that they are in existence for as long as a digital world is in existence. And at any point, if you want to just download and have a hard copy or a printed copy at any point and not be part of the platform anymore, you can. But I genuinely feel it's the process that's the gift. It's the process connection. And that should be eternal, because it's the ritual. And that ritual, the salve that it gives to the soul is the eternal connection.
And see, and that might be, Caroline, what is the missing link? Because if you think about how funeral practices or burial practices were in the past, the family washed and dressed the deceased, and the funeral, the wake was in the home.
Absolutely.
Heather, I used to live in New England, and I loved the old houses with the double doors. Well, the double doors were because they needed the door to be wide enough to get the casket in and out. And there were, always a room that sort of had a curve in it, a bay in it, where the casket could go. And, you think, oh, these are just, architectural details. Well, no, they were architectural details because they served a purpose, because people were going to die and they were going to be laid out, packed and laid out in that room, and people were going to come and they were going to eat and they were going to drink and they were going to talk about that person. And you were up close and personal with that whole process, which now, you can live to 60 some years old, 70, depending on, and not have anybody die and not see that. And then, if they die in the hospital, if they die in the nursing home, it's not an intimate experience that you're experiencing unless you stay and be with them for that. And then they go to the funeral home, and that whole process happens without your involvement. And then they're laid out in a place where, you go, you have visiting hours, times when you can go and be there. And it's a whole sort of whitewashing of death. You know,
Yep.
it's
And that's
the
why everybody's so traumatized. That's why everybody's so traumatized, because we have lost the connection to our loved one. And all of a sudden, somebody else is representing them. Somebody else is talking about their memories. They didn't even know them. Somebody else is dressing their body. They didn't even know them. And we've become afraid. We've become afraid of that person now that they are dead, because either, again, it's because of the system, but because it could be because of the religious order that perhaps took it away. It could be because society says, you can't handle the dead body. We have to get a mortician or a coroner or an ambulance person, or, you can't handle them. Somebody else has to do it. The first homes we ever built as a human race, as a human species, were for our dead. The very first homes, when we were cave women and cave men and cave families, we built homes for our dead. Outside of the cave, we built homes for our dead. And then in the last 200 years, this whole process of, or even less than that, I'm sure, but this whole process has been removed from us for the first time in history. I think it was probably with the onset of the Civil War and the development of formaldehyde and the preserving of the bodies to move them backwards and forwards. It involved somebody else embalming the body. Then it involved somebody else taking the body to do the embalming, or it took somebody else, and then society just developed around that, including the history with cemeteries themselves. They used to be in our village. It used to be part of our community. It used to be something that the whole family, as you say, the homes were built to accommodate the fact that we all live, we all die, and these are the necessary parts for it. And then the village would have the necessary, would have the graveyard nearby, in the garden, in, the community square. That's all changed, cemeteries have gone through all these different iterations, but I do hope and believe it is changing back, or it is changing forward to a new awareness in this part of the world. And I feel like in the East, they've kind of got it down and still maintained a better relationship with death, and with the ritual around mourning and the ritual around burial. They do it so much better than us. But unless, of course, it's become westernized in its approach, which is also a different thing. But over here, we've lost touch a lot with that. But it is coming back, and there is what they call a death positive movement. I know people have an aversion to that expression, but it's hard to come up with a term that does envelop this conscious dying and conscious burial, green burial, different options, as you talked about, a reckoning that we need to care for our loved ones in their death. And we need to recognize that we don't need to be so afraid, although it is terribly sad and it can be horrible and, awfully shocking if it happens accidentally or suddenly. And grief can be compound and all of these different things. But essentially at its core, we should be getting back to a different relationship with death and with loss. And it is an interesting thing. I remember one night I was working in the cemetery in Hollywood, at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery, where I have a few monuments. And I was in the back stoneyard area creating a headstone. And it was getting dark and everybody had left. And there was just one maintenance guy that came to put the tools away from, managing the ground. Sweet young chap. And he turned around and says to me, well, it's funny because there's a lot of peacocks around there, and all the peacocks have been fighting in the stoneyard and pulling each other's feathers out and driving me crazy. And he comes around and he says to me, are you all right? Are you afraid of him? And I look back and I'm like, the peacock? And he goes, no, not the peacock. But, the rest of the inhabitants of the graveyard, And I'm like, oh, gosh, no. Why? And he's like, well, and I said, because they're dead? I said, no, listen, have you ever lost anyone you loved? And he said, no. And I said, well, I have. And just because they died, they didn't suddenly become like something ghoulish and horrifying and scary. And so no, I don't even think for a minute of being scared of the people that are buried here, or the souls, or the spirits, or the bodies, I should say. It's just a body. It's a no. And I feel, yeah. So I thought it was quite an interesting and funny moment. But that's very much to do with it. I think that, just because somebody dies, they don't become something horrible. And we've society sort of attached so many different things because we haven't progressed or regressed, perhaps. We've sort of been put upon with these different ideas around death and fears around death and fears around loss, and it's all gotten very mixed up and removed from the natural process. But again, coming back to it all, I think it is, and I'm hoping it is changing, and there is definitely a movement. There is definitely a growing awareness around death and conscious death and end of life and planning and talking and things like what you're doing, things what I'm doing, green burial, all of these things. They're all moving towards us having a better relationship with death, staying connected to our loved ones, living a better life because of that.
Well, Caroline, I really appreciate your perspective and your company and your willingness to talk with our listeners about what it is that you offer. And for our listeners, look at our show notes. We have how you can contact Tree of Life Memorials and Digital and Stone, and all of the links there for you. And we really appreciate you taking your time today to help us normalize death.
Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline Jones. And for this week's episode, that's it. Please stay tuned for the continuing saga of Everyone Dies, and thank you for listening. This is Charlie Navarrete, and from Ian Fleming, the one-time spy who created James Bond, you only live twice, once when you're born and once when you look death in the face.
And I'm Marianne Matzo, and we'll see you next week. Remember, every day is a gift.
This podcast does not provide medical advice. All discussion on this podcast, such as treatments, dosages, outcomes, charts, patient profiles, advice, messages, and any other discussion are for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your primary care practitioner or other qualified health providers with any questions that you may have regarding your health. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard from this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or 911 immediately. Everyone Dies does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, practitioners, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned in this podcast. Reliance on any information provided in this podcast by persons appearing on this podcast at the invitation of Everyone Dies or by other members is solely at your own risk.